Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first lecture under ChemVision, the industrial webinar series. Today we have Mr. Umesh Bhide in conversation with Professor Guruswamy with us, who is an esteemed professor of our chemical engineering department at IIT Bombay. Over to you, Guru sir.
Thank you very much, Kriti. And it's a pleasure to welcome Umesh to this session of Azeotropy. It's a pleasure to introduce Umesh for many reasons. Umesh and I were classmates at IIT Bombay. We were both undergraduates at IIT Bombay many years ago. Following which, after his BTech, Umesh went to the US to do his master's in chemical engineering at the University of Wyoming. And after his master's, he spent some years in the industry working on engineering consulting problems. First at for a long time at Parsons in Pasadena, California, and then later with the Fluor Corporation. Subsequent to that, Umesh switched tracks and did an MBA from the University of Michigan. And in fact, we sort of happened to meet up when he was at Michigan, and which is when I learned that he had sort of switched tracks. And then he after he finished his MBA, he came back to the country where he worked initially in consulting, working for Anderson. And then subsequently, he worked for several years, for about 8 years with DuPont, and currently he's an independent consultant, having spent about a year at another consulting organization. So Umesh's passion has really been a variety of issues related to health and safety, and I think that's really informed a lot of the work that he's doing and a lot of his consulting. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Umesh. I'd love to hear more about your experience in the consulting field in the chemical industry. Thank you, Umesh. Umesh, you're muted.
Sorry. Okay, so I hope the screen is visible and I'm audible. Thank you very much, Guru, and pleasure to be here. IIT is also my alma mater. And when I see all these guys, Niranjan, Kruti, and you, Guru, as part of the IIT community, it's a different feeling. Okay, so I feel like I'm back home. So once again, a audio check, a video check, Niranjan, Guru. Am I good to go? Slide visible. I'm audible. Everything is okay.
Everything is good. You're great to go.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So we have 1 hour, all of us. Guru has already introduced me. I just wanted to highlight few things that will help you probably understand my background a little better. So out of school for 26 years now, 94 pass out, the last bullet point on this slide. So 26 years, out of that 22 years working and 2 masters, 2 years each, masters and MBA. So that's why 22 years of working experience. Broadly, and I'll explain what I mean by operations consulting, but all my experience I thought I could club as operations consulting. It was split in employers such as Fluor and Parsons. These are big EPC firms, engineering, procurement, construction, and they were in US. And my India stints were Accenture, DuPont, and ERM in that order. And I was with ERM until 2 months back. ERM stands for Environmental Resources Management. Okay, that's one split. So again, in terms of geography, where I've spent these years, Guru highlighted, US. So broadly, 15 years in India, 13 properly in India, and 2 roaming around in Kuwait and Malaysia as part of a traveling consultant. So 15 after relocating. 9 years in US, 11 years in US, like I said, 4 years in school and 7 years working, right? So that's you will get a feel for the years spent at home and abroad and in other parts of the world. Segregation of experience. So how are these 22 years mapping out? When I looked at my split, 7 years are in technical consulting, which I would say for you guys, engineering design, and that would be a very nice extension to some of the 3rd year and 4th year guys and girls, the courses you guys are taking. So did it in real life, in these EPC firms, and I'll elaborate as I go on. Then I went to the business school and then management consulting, where I learned formal problem solving and all sorts of consulting. Project management and delivery focused, right? So I didn't have sales responsibility, but I was doing work, I was writing deliverables, I was doing analysis, and also presenting to the clients. And last 10 years, largely DuPont and ERM has been in a commercial role, consultative selling and key account management. And rightfully so, because and I'll come to this later on, to sell, you need to first do, right? So don't get into, those concepts right now, but I want to give you a full picture of where I am. So, you also need to know what you will be doing 15 years down the line. So that's why I'm including this, but that's how my experience pans out when I ask myself, what did I do for the 22 years, right? So just wanted to kind of take a pause and, give you that kind of split. Yeah. So this is the agenda for everyone. What we will do is we have first 2 sections are big. I will try and give you some insights into what you would be knowing by talking to your friends and reading in the newspapers, like the classic consulting, the glamorous careers of management consulting, strategy consulting. So how is that different than what I have done? Although Accenture was partly that. So I would try and give you some insights on that. Then we'll get into the why, what, and how that is coming out of my experience. So that would be the longest section of the speech. Then I'll try and give you few conceptual feel for in safety, health, and environment consulting. What are some of the key concepts, your takeaways? So I would like those to be with you, and so it's just a humble attempt to give you a little bit of core concepts. Okay. Then come some stories. I want to bring some of my experiences alive. You guys are students, and I thought this would be interesting for you. And then lastly, what is in it for me? So if I put myself in Niranjan's shoes or Kriti's shoes, then what she would be asking, why I should do this, and what do I need to have to get this? If this career excites me, what is it that I need to develop, right? So that's the last part. One note here is that for the audience, we Professor Guru and I discussed yesterday, we will try and take few questions in between the 2 sections, as opposed to the entire 45 minutes and 15-minute Q&A, and that may flow better. So we'll try and moderate. Guru sir will moderate that, but we will not wait for the end. If you do have a burning question as I complete one section, kindly take a note, and we'll try and make at least 1 or 2 questions between the 2 sections, and we'll try and wrap it up around 5 minutes after 6 India time. Okay, so Professor Guru, good to go once again. Time check, flow check, good to go.
Going well. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So now I will not bother you with that question. So it looks like things are working. These days working from home and the technology, you need to doubly sure whether everything is working, right? So, okay, good. So one conceptual slide here I've tried to make it simple for you engineering grads. On the left is something that you would be knowing through like your background, I guess. So strategy, traditional management consulting, and on right, what I have put in as operations consulting, with specific focus on HSE. HSE stands for health, safety, and environment. There are different versions of these abbreviations popular. Somebody calls it, and different companies call it like SHE or EHS, but I just keep it at HSE. In terms of objective, so management consulting, obviously you are helping a client, top line and bottom line. Top line is the revenue. So how do you sell more and how do you make more money, right? And one analogy I'll keep alluding to, so I will just introduce that, is I just call a consultant a business doctor. Okay, and maybe you can keep that at the back of your mind. So everybody is familiar in COVID and in non-COVID era, something happens to you, you go to a doctor, right? So consultant is nothing less than a doctor, because you have a problem and you ask somebody based on your experience, based on the insights and research, how do we solve it, right? So this is being business doctor, and one problem clients in that context, one problem clients usually come, and that's why they pay the doctor, is how do I make more money and how do I make more profits. In operations consulting, we are actually focusing on doing that more on the bottom line, more on the profits, by saving lives, protecting assets, and improving environment. And why there is a business case for that, I will come back to that later. But clearly, you are looking at impacting human life. You're avoiding accidents. You are improving safety. So you are taking care of the equipment and the plant and the assets and the land, and of course, environment. Right? I mean, the air that we breathe in, our family and our children. If you're working in a plant, so even that could be an issue, and that is part of operations consulting as an objective. Right? Stakeholders, largely the same, but I want to highlight one difference. So here, while on the left-hand side, you're talking to the big bosses, top and middle management, CEOs, corporate functions, and business leaders who are, growing the business, and that's why they're hiring these top-notch, smart kids like you, right? But on the right-hand side, you also you will play your chemical engineering hat much more. Even if some of you go to fancy business schools, right? Do not forget that you are a chemical engineer, because here you will be talking to supervisors and shop floor workers and contractors. Okay, so if you really don't like chemical engineering, then take a hard call. But I'm assuming you like chemical engineering because you're here, and be proud to be a chemical engineer. And it's a wonderful feeling to walk with a shop floor worker, talk to them in their local language, and figure out what problems they are facing, right? So in this consulting, you will essentially interact probably more at the bottom and less at the top. Of course, the big boss will see your presentation, will see your findings, but I wanted to kind of put it on the table that you may not be working in a plant, but as a consultant, you will be actually going to the plant, right? Engagement model, work directly with the teams in the management consulting style. So, Niranjan is my buddy over here. He's one of the audience IIT guy, organizer of the event. So I'll use his name. Excuse me, Niranjan, for using your name, but and do not mind. It's just for example purpose, guys. So if Niranjan tells his mother that I'm on a project and next 4 months I will be going to Bangalore. Okay, I will be taking a Monday morning flight, coming back on Thursday, doing my expense report on Friday, and because this client is based in Bangalore, and this is a 4-month project, he will really burn midnight oil from Monday to Thursday, because he'll be in a hotel, he'll keep working, and and he'll do brilliant work, etc. Right? So that some of you are familiar with that, the traveling consultant model. Post-COVID, of course, the travel element will change, but let's assume pre-COVID consulting style. We don't know how it will be. The travel will reduce, but let's not make any conclusions yet on post-COVID consulting world. Right? Work on site on the right-hand side. Here, the engagement that I have seen, it doesn't require the so-called HSE doctor to be present on site all the time. In fact, clients may want you to, but you tell them, I will not, right? So the work is typically I've seen 1 week to 2 weeks on site per month, and then you go back, you give them some homework, you come back, you see your family, and so it's not as hectic in terms of travel. And why that style, is prevalent is because these are not really very, very analytical problems you're solving, right? So sometimes there is an element of behavior, and you taught them something, you need them to grasp those concepts, and then you're going there to check on them again. So these engagements could last for 1 to 2 years, but then your intensity of being at the client site is not all at once, right? If you're working on multiple engagements, yes, I mean that's a different problem. So you're working for one client in Bangalore for the first 2 weeks, and then second client in Kolkata for last 2 weeks. 2 different projects is okay, but per client you are not stationary there. You don't ask for a cabin and like a hotel room for 4 months, right? So that's the difference in terms of work, and we'll get into deep dive later on. On the left hand side, it's typical. It's using your smarts, analysis, interviews, what clients are talking about, tools, model, document development, and presentation. So in Accenture, where I worked, they use the terminology as is and to be, right? So first you need to figure out what is as is. How is the client operating? What is their as is? For that, you need to do all this, what I have listed over there. And then you have to help them to go to 2B, right? That's their aspired state, whether it's presence in different market, whether it's selling adjacent products, whether it's, targeting a different segment of customers, whatever it is. And that's the 2B state, right? On the right-hand side, here you are doing a lot of site walkthroughs, training, coaching, hand-holding. I didn't use that word, but when you are improving health, safety, and environment at a plant, you are actually hand-holding a lot of people, right? So it is a lot of behavioral, a lot of interactions. You will do classroom training. You will also do one-on-one coaching and whatnot. Again, I'll come to the details, but there is little difference between the type of work. And I'll leave this slide with an example. In my own experience. So the left-hand side is that we were working for a Mexican company, a cement company. They acquired significant plants, particularly in southern US, in Texas and California. And this was year 2004. And in 5 years, they aspired to be in the Fortune Great Places to Work for a list of, I think, 200 companies. And these Fortune criteria are set by an institute called Great Places to Work that's based in San Francisco, California. And imagine the tough decision or the tough ambition of this Mexican company that not only they're entering US just recently, but they want to be in the top 200 favorite employers in 5 years after the acquisition of this plant. And they came to us and said, how do we get there? So do a reality check that do we have a chance to get there? And can we get there? And how do we get there? So very interesting problem. Again, for you chemical engineers, you will think why, what has to do with my engineering, right? But of course, it's a cement plant, right? And so the engineering background did help for me. Even talking to the clients, right? So that's one example of, I would call, and the results were fantastic. I mean, I will not give you the results, but we were able to conclude where they are. We had some criteria. We assessed this client. We talked to a lot of people, and we gave them the outcome, and we actually ended up presenting to the big guy based in Houston. Okay. On the right-hand side, similar analogy, but similar example, but in a different context. Here is an Indian company. They acquired a unit in South India, a single unit, and it was on the so-called block for sale for like 5 years. And the HSE was the last thing that was on anybody's mind. So when I visited this unit, it was definitely not matching the culture of this Indian company. It was not looking like, it's like an adopted child, pardon this analogy, but the adopted child was not at all looking similar to the children living at home. Okay. So there was a lot of work, and the client was saying, help this adopted child fall in track of this household mode, bring this child, at par with the other family members, so that's the job. So when it comes to pollution, when it comes to safety record, employee morale, the assets, the way they work, etc. So a lot of, I would say, a lot of mess. But it was a very interesting problem for us to solve. That how do we? And they set something like a 3 years target for them to come up to the level of these Indian companies, the other plants, right? So hope I'm giving you some clarity on the differences. Okay, and I guess before we end this section, I just wanted to pre-introduce this concept. That most of you would have seen the movie Titanic, and if one thing that you would have noticed in the Titanic movie is that the tip of the iceberg concept, right? So what you see, what the Titanic captain saw was the tip of the iceberg. What he failed to realize is how much iceberg was hidden inside, below the surface of the water, right? This analogy has been used in a cost context for the safety incidents or accidents, right? So the direct cost of a safety related incident are small. They are insured costs, they are apparent damage, and somebody is injured and their hospital charges. All of that you could probably guess. You don't even need to be in an engineering school for figuring that out, right? You are reading about accidents and you know that there is some money to be involved, right? But what you are not seeing is the huge iceberg below the surface of water. And you can read some of those points over there, that there is a lost time, there is loss of production, there is a failure to fill orders. Of course, your plant is not working. There are overheads while the work was disrupted. So much is there that you may not even be able to easily quantify how much damage that is. And clearly, the intangible cost, human tragedy. I mean, if somebody is losing their life, you remember Bhopal, I mean, there is no way we can even estimate the human tragedy costs, right? The morale, the reputation, right? If your friend works for with a company and there is an accident, and people are saying, oh, you work there, so how he will feel. So that's his morale. And then what you will think about his company, that's their reputation. So obviously there are uninsured hidden costs, out-of-pocket expenses. So I would like you to kind of keep this at the back of your mind when we talk about safety consulting or operations consulting, right? So I thought this is an important concept. I brought it ahead. And before we get into a little bit of a bigger section, I would just, Professor Guru, it's perfectly okay if somebody has a question or two for me based on what we've covered so far.
So right now, I think we haven't seen very many questions come up. I had a quick question, Umesh,
sure.
While we are on this.
Sure.
In a sense, this is sort of like insurance, right? In the sense that these are costs which you will incur if there is an accident that occurs, right? And therefore, it is especially hard for companies to then find it in them to estimate the risk and therefore get into paying for some of these, right? So, how in your experience, how does that pan out in terms of how do you get people to recognize the seriousness of this and not get into this attitude that things are going to be fine, there's going to be no problem?
If I understand the question right, are you saying that the direct costs are obvious, but as a consultant trying to make an entry into a company to help them with this, how do you make your case? Is that or is it about mindset that you're asking? This I'm sorry, but can you please?
Both, right? In the sense that these are of course you always plan for eventualities, right? But you associate a probability with that eventuality, right? A lot of times people in operation are unwilling to consider that probability as being something reasonable, right? So how does one say that this is really important and you can't neglect it?
Okay, got it. So I hope I got it. It's about being reactive or proactive. I guess that's the question is. And so what you are alluding to is, how do you talk to a client who has not had an accident and who has an attitude where everything is hunky-dory, and if they are producing and they think that they are good, how do you kind of pick a conversation with them? I'll probably interpret the question.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. Excellent. So in DuPont parlance, we call it reactive or proactive or leading and lagging indicators. Okay, rather I would say leading and lagging indicators is a concept that I would probably touch upon later. Lagging indicator, Professor Guru, is the costs, etc. I mean, the things which happen after an incident has happened are lagging indicators. Many companies are measuring that very well, and they get really shaken when the lagging indicators look bad. So if you are the plant head and you are working in December and this year has been bad for you and you had 3 near misses, okay, so that will look bad on your report card because it has already happened. So imagine you there with 3 near misses, and we'll pause there, and there is somebody else, there is Niranjan over there in other plant, and he never had those incidents, and he's also sitting in December, and he's had a fantastic track record. He has got a good production, and his boss is happy. Now, 2 things when I, Umesh, has approached them, and let's say I also take a look at Niranjan's plans, and I don't think everything is hunky-dory, although there are no incidents and there is complacency. So one communication is that it has not happened doesn't mean it will not happen. It will not happen. And I will ask Niranjan, where are your leading indicators? Okay, so lagging is what we saw after the event has happened, right? Leading indicators are how are your and those that is getting into detailed consulting. So I'll try to make it short, but how are your observations looking like? Probably near miss is a good thing. That how many times you almost had an accident? Do you measure that? So don't be thinking you are lucky that it didn't happen. But if near miss is a leading indicator, that's an indicator of a future event that is going to happen. So we teach clients not to be complacent. Also, if they are measuring only the lagging indicators, we teach them what leading indicators to measure. right? Such as, for example, near misses or the type of safety observations, the status of housekeeping, sometimes even talking to the people and what their aspirations are. There is some sort of assessment, and maybe somebody out there thinks that it is not hunky dory, okay, and we'll have to formalize that. But essentially, as consultants, sometimes we have to make certain leading KPIs, educate the client that the client may be really good. I mean, then as a consultant, we say that you guys keep doing what you're doing. Don't just count on your luck. God has been kind. But if we don't think like that, if we think that they are only lucky and complacent, then we teach them the importance of leading indicators, because you should actually measure yourself on leading indicators. That will prevent, I would say, future accident. So if in a Titanic context, that route which is likely to have those icebergs, have you done the route analysis, and can you avoid that stretch of Atlantic in the middle of the night? If in the past, if there are icebergs, why you are only taking that route, right? So that's a leading, and so proactively change the route. And if that captain probably took a daytime while he was traversing there, maybe he would have avoided that accident. Or if that ship was traveling there in the in the season where there are a lot of icebergs, maybe. Or if you are a person who are booking your ticket on that ship in April, right? That's also a leading indicator. You would rather book this trip in July, for example. So we teach clients how to anticipate accidents, how to see, how to foresee what is coming, and try and even eliminate those hypothetically happening probabilities later on. So long discussion, but I hope I have thrown some light on that.
Yeah, and I won't distract you any longer so that we can keep your time.
No, thanks a lot. Yes. But typically, I guess my passing comment is that your question was very good. Typically, these, at least, and I should not make this statement about particular part of the world, but companies in the developing part of the world typically call ambulance when there is almost a dead man. Okay, I'm sorry to say that, but safety consultants in my previous boss's parlance was ambulance chasers, right? Or from a business perspective, or shraadh ke bhaji in a consulting perspective. So it's really, really tragic that people wake up only when Elphinstone Road tragedy kills all these people, right? So we human beings in certain parts of the world or certain cultures wake up only when something shaky happens, right? And that's the challenge. We don't typically talk to people as consultants where everything is going well. They will not call you, they will not go to the doctor, business doctor thing. If you think you are eating well and sleeping well, you don't need to see the doctor. Well, you may be developing clots in your system, right? So it's about the checkup and really falling ill, right? So consultants are typically getting a call only when, like you said, something bad happens. So that's the norm. But having said that, it's our role to keep them out of that complacency. And even companies like DuPont had severe accidents, after 50 years of no accident track record, for example. So the complacency attitude is anyway bad, and in safety, you just have to continually do it, and don't really pat your back and think that okay, everything is going fine. Okay, so that's like an ongoing journey. Yeah. Okay, so we will keep going. Just give me one. I'm sorry to, I need to plug in my laptop. So just give me 1 minute. Okay, great. So we will now get into, thanks a lot, Professor Guru, for those questions. Okay, so I'm going to get into the real nitty-gritties of, give you the real feel for what we have done and what you may want to do when you probably take up this career or think about it, right? So first of all, why? And we touched upon some of that in Professor Guru's comments and my comments, we just saw. Why do clients need this, right? So A is clearly, I'm in trouble and I've had a serious incident. So I try to articulate some of the pain points, common pain points. It's a consulting parlance. So what are the pain points? Typically, if you are a young consultant and if you get a call from a client, or if your neighbor has a plant, your boss will ask you, what is the pain point? Okay. Or if you're a doctor, or if you're an emerging doctor, your main doctor will ask you, what is the patient complaining about, right? So that's the pain point. So I've tried to articulate some typical pain points that Umesh in his career experienced. Okay. And they are in no particular order of importance. I've just tried to list them as they came to my mind. So few of them are, and these are like, you could say these are the client quotes. When Umesh gets a call, these are the quotes, right? Or when Umesh speaks to a client, that's what the client will say, right? So interpret it like that. So I have all the systems and processes, but my people don't follow them. So I'm a safety leader. I think everything is fine, but I don't see people following any instructions that they are supposed to. Secondly, my injury rates are being watched by my bosses, and my unit is losing space among internal comparison with other units. So very often I get a call from a unit in Pimpri near Pune, for example, and Pimpri has had a bad year, and a couple of guys almost lost their hand. There was near miss on hand injury, and because of that, the Ahmednagar plant guys are saying, "Oh, you guys in Pimpri, I mean, you are just you're not doing good," and that's not a good feeling, right, for the Pimpri guys. So I get a call that why this is happening, right? I'm not getting talented people to choose to work at my place due to poor safety or environmental records or poor air quality in the vicinity. I was in my early career, I met a young man who was 26 years old and whose cadmium levels were monitored in the plant he was working. And I didn't even know the impact of cadmium on a human body, even being a consultant at that time. So he was 26, I was like 30. And I asked, why is it your concern? So he says that apparently cadmium impacts the fertility of a young man. And if my cadmium levels are increasing, then I don't want to work at this place. And I thought that's a very well said kind of conclusion. I actually, and he was looking for a better job, and clearly he was worried about, his own health, right? So probably a generation back, people may not have thought about these things, but my generation, definitely in your generation, I'm sure you will think about it definitely more and more, right? But that's a real issue. So this gentleman's boss will say, hey, the young people don't just stick around over here, and why that is happening, right? So that's the big boss problem. My corporate boss will invite me to present the incident at my workplace in a safety review meeting, and I'm worried about the questions being raised. So many times the large organizations which are doing excellent work in safety are making the head of the unit responsible for the incident happening at their plant, right? And as a monthly protocol or whatever, suppose you are in a corporate team and Umesh is running a unit in Gujarat, and if Umesh unit has an issue, I would say incident, and there is a difference between accident and incident. Incident could be an injury, it could be an environmental release, it could be a fatality, or anything can be an incident. And if there is an incident in Umesh's plant, then in Mumbai, in the corporate office, Umesh has to come and explain what happened, so that he takes ownership of that. He doesn't say that, oh, that safety leader was just sleeping. Okay, so it's not a blame game, right? So by making unit heads or the leaders responsible and pushing them to present in the corporate meeting is not a good thing. So if I am that unit head, I would probably call Professor Guru, if he is my HSC consultant, and say, Professor Guru, can you please come and help me, right? So that's why this is a pain point. My variable pay is linked with my safety performance, and I'm losing it almost every year. Now, this is again a very interesting thing. Blame it on consultants like us, that many times some organizations link the variable pay of certain people to the safety performance. Now, you will scratch your head and say, well, why I should get less money if there are accidents in my place? Isn't it my bad luck? No, definitely not. Okay, so again, I don't want to spend too much detail. What it means is that you can't just blame it on bad luck. I mean, if your plant had some incidents, and that's why you and your KPI, your grade card in IIT parlance, your GPA or your CPI is related to the incidents in your plant, and two accidents meaning a bad CPI or bad GPA. It's not all about bad luck, guys. Okay, so but that's again reason to look at doing something better, doing something more, call a consultant, call an expert, etc. Right? So it's a very real pain point. The last point on this slide, there's something called occupier. If some of you may not know or may know, there is like a Factory Act in India, and a Factory Act requires somebody senior in a plant to be in a role of an occupier. And that person is probably a very senior, very, very responsible kind of person, but they can face serious legal hassles. They can go to court, etc., if there are fatal incidents at the site. Okay, so clearly, I've had a couple of guys, a couple of senior managing directors talk to me about how occupiers were having a hard time and how they needed a consultant help. Right. Some more. Okay. I'm closing my production unit and selling my land to a residential property developer who would like an impact assessment report. So this is more in the field of environment. So it's easy. I mean, these days, everybody, like some of you are staying in Mumbai, and how I stay in Thane. I see every day like how different apartment complexes are being launched. And whether it's Wagle Estate near my house or whether it's Ghodbandar Road, not very near my house, but I guess every 1 or 2 years a big plant is being shut down and some new complex is coming there, right? I mean, there is a Kalpataru, there is some or IKEA is coming in New Mumbai, and there was some chemical unit before that. So when it comes to change of land use, clearly there are a lot of risks when the new land use is a residential kind of land use. Most of the time, the environmental laws, the water laws in our country take care of these basic issues, but it is very important to know the impacts of the process operation that has been happening at that site. Okay, so you as a consultant will play a crucial role in figuring out, in quotes, the damage done by the production unit. If tomorrow a high-end apartment complex is to come there, you don't want a kid to be born 10 years later to have some health issue by drinking the water in that vicinity, which was polluted by that production unit. So these issues are becoming very, very real. They are very complicated in developed world, but they are also becoming very, very important in our country. Okay, more and more so in the coming years. I'm setting up a unit in a country where there are no stringent air quality norms, but I have to follow my home country emission norms. So you are an engineer, you are designing something, and it is in some country XYZ, and you study their laws, and those laws are not very well defined. But then your head office tells you that, well, then follow the home country norms, right? So you can't just say that, oh, you can emit anything in that country. Then you actually look at what your own country requires you to emit, right? Whether it's India, whether it's US, and I've seen many examples where I had to study the home country laws before applying those to the design of the unit in a different country. A single process safety incident can stop my production for multiple days. I mean, another classic pain point. Hey, something has happened. Nobody lost their life. Nobody cut their fingers. Everybody is fine. Luckily, it was at 4 a.m. in the morning and there were nobody on the shop floor. But because of that, my production is stopped. Something collapsed, a chimney collapsed, or a kiln got burned. And now I'm not able to produce till the incident is investigated, and my boss is really giving me hard time because every day I'm not producing, I'm losing so much money. Right? Very, very classic problem of a process safety incident. Last one, my customer sees my production facility during an audit and denies a large order based on what the audit findings are. So again, very real. I mean, some clients have really told me the stories, the bad stories. The customer insisted that, hey, before I place an order of a big process equipment from your unit, one of our guys would like to see that. And sometimes they are overseas buyers, let's say ExxonMobil buying a big piece of machinery from Godrej, for example. I'm using these names only as examples, probably no semblance of truth there, but just so that you guys get to imagine how these things work. And sometimes the visit of this overseas buyer or a very sophisticated buyer pushes you to produce it in a neater way, I would say, right? And that pushes you to really, really straighten up your mess, clean up your mess, and do some things right. And until that time, you will not secure that order. So clearly, we saw the tip of the iceberg. Of course, we saw all the costs, but even these are indirect costs. I mean, these are the implications of not having a clearly clean, safe operating facility, because you are losing your future business because somebody doesn't like it, right? So again, a lot of concepts. I hope I'm giving you some reality feel, and I'm deliberately going slow because these are real. You may need to think about these, and you may have questions, but allow me to kind of just keep giving you these insights. We will make up the speed later, but allow me to speak here on these slides. So we looked at why. Now we'll look at what. Okay, and maybe some of you have questions around that. So what do we do then? So clearly, one of the pain points brings you back to the client, and then you are tasked with, well, my people don't know why it happened. Okay, so you help me understand the root cause, which requires fact finding, document review, data analysis, interviews, and site visits, right? So you have an apparent description of an incident. The client calls you, but you are definitely like a detective. You are just really, really scratching your brains, scratching your head, working with your colleagues, and really, really figuring out what really went wrong. And there's a tool. There are various tools to represent, this kind of incident investigation output. You actually investigate an incident. That could be one work you would be doing. Another piece of interesting work you would be doing could be the designing a near-term and long-term action plan to be jointly implemented by the consultant and the client, right? So who will do what? You as a consultant cannot do everything. Your immediate client manager cannot do everything. There would be some young guys, they cannot do everything, but then who does what? Because these are, again, multiple actions to be done by multiple people, many times in tandem with each other. It's not Niranjan will do thing X, Umesh will do thing Y. It could be that, all sorts of cuts and teams and priorities and Gantt charts, right? So that could be something you will be part of. For enhancing capability of client teams, you will probably end up doing training and coaching of the people. And remember, I told you, you will walk on the shop floor, you will talk to people. Sometimes they could be fairly uneducated workers, and even them you have to train, right? Even them you have to train. There are various methods to do this, right? And that you will figure out with your team, and your boss will tell you, your client boss will tell you. But capability building is definitely one area where consultants are required. For enhancing systems and processes, consultants have to review the standards and procedures and governance and org structure. So because we are business doctors, we are also entitled to ask the client a lot of questions that, hey, show me how you are governing erection of a scaffold on your distillation unit when the unit is out for a maintenance. Then you will the client will show you how the scaffolds are erected. Now, if you see that the standard with which the scaffolds are to be erected itself has some issues, you can imagine the poor scaffolding leading to a contractor guy falling from the scaffold and probably having a serious accident, right? So that's what I mean by making your hands dirty. So what are the contractors reading? What are they following? Is it well written? If it is not well written, then it is your job to kind of write it well. And for that purpose, you will reach out to the experts. In DuPont, for example, I often looked at how DuPont was doing it, or what are the industry best practices, right? And that's what the clients are really looking up to and valuing your expertise on that, right? For mitigating top risks, the consultants need to work on risk metrics and map various risks to it. Okay, so you will also often, you will have 10 problems, right? And clients will say that solve all 10 problems, but you can't just start with problem number 8. You got to ideally start with number 1 issue first, make some progress there, and that number 1 based on what, right? So you have to take care of the top risk of the client. So if it's a process safety risk, like Professor Guru was saying, if I saw the near miss, if I saw a equipment which is probably having some cracks, okay, and we observe that, then my job as a consultant is to tell the client, hey, please replace that. Okay, that's the top priority, because if it breaks, a lot of bad things can happen. So what problem to solve, and to number the problems, you have to look at the risk matrix. You take a calculative approach on solving. Again, it's like, you have 5 subjects, there is an end sem happening. Your most important subject, where you are most worried about, you will probably study more, right? I mean, all of us do that, but in consulting parlance, we use the term called risk matrix. So look at your top risks, make sure you are addressing the top risk before you go to the risk number 2 and so forth. Otherwise, there's just too much to do, and then you will really, really struggle to do that. Okay, I'll probably quickly rush through this. You will also look at if it's a process safety. If there are a lot of hazardous chemicals, you will need to understand the various scenarios, what causes those, and what consequences happen, and what are the barriers. And that particular point, your chemical engineering knowledge from what Guru sir is teaching you, and what your other I have a lot of other students over here, respective college, what your good professors are teaching you, your understanding of the processes, what happens in a reactor, what happens in a distillation column, is very important, because that's what will lead you to brainstorm on well, if that liquid boils and if the equipment ruptures, what will happen, right? So you will often be part of that team, right? For environmental impact assessments, we of course need to know the process, where the release can happen, what is being emitted, let's look at the samples, etc., right? For compliance, you may need to look at the laws, right? I mean, Delhi is talking about ambient air quality, people are talking about particulate matter, but you as a consultant need to know how these things are defined. I mean, how do you figure out the concentration? What's the sample size? I mean, how do you measure that concentration, right? So, and what laws are saying? So how do you assess a compliance status of a plant, right? For culture, you have to have some soft skills, and you got to have some benchmarks and tools to figure out where the client is today, the as-is concept of Accenture. So where is the culture today, and where is the culture they want to have develop tomorrow, right? So that could be some very interesting non-quantitative science work that you will be involved in as a consultant. Having said that, every time you will need to, in quotes I've used, handhold the client personnel. Clients don't pay for a report that just sits in the cabin of a boss. So don't think that you deliver something, you give a nice PPT, and then it sits with the managing director, and everything is good. No, I mean, unless that medicine is reaching out to the bottommost worker, the safety will not improve. So safety reports or the deliverables, if they sit in the cabin of a boss, then that means you have not done a good job, right? It needs to be translated. Many times corporate standard will be broken into a site-specific procedure. The site-specific procedure may be broken down into work instruction, and sometimes even in Marathi, Hindi, Gujarati, Kannada, whatever language the plant, I mean the vicinity, the plant is located in, you may need that local language to describe that, right? Ultimately, consultants need to create sustainable capacity, because the clients cannot have you visiting them all the time. So your client boss will say, hey, please make sure my people pick up some of your skills. If you are a smart kid from IIT Bombay, teach some of your smarts to my people. Okay, so again, that's why you guys need to know your stuff, to teach somebody else, to pass on that knowledge, to create some kind of sustenance. You need to be solid, right? So in the eventuality, the doctor has to make the patient run, right? Doctor cannot keep running with the patient. So that's the concept over here. How? Quickly, I mean, business development is a process. It is very iterative. It's not like you have those pain points. You figured out the pain point, and now you know what proposal to give. So it's very iterative. You have to kind of have one version of the proposal, show it to the client, debate it, and many times it takes 2, 3, 4 months, okay, to develop a consulting proposal. This is a people business. So if you are a consultant and there are favorites, right? I mean, your personality traits matter a lot, your knowledge matters a lot. Clients can say that give me person X, but don't give me person Y. Okay, so, and that is very real. You as a consultant will travel. So there is a travel expectation. You go to the corporate office, you go to the sites. Do you go once a month? I mean, all that depends on the work and your manager and your team and the budget and all that, right? Once on site, this is important. You will need to make your hands dirty. Casual clothes may make your life easy, but you may have to wear. Everybody nowadays is used to wearing mask, right? But that mask is very important in a cement plant. Okay, even before COVID, I was wearing mask while I was in DuPont consulting to a cement client, right? So, but apart from mask, I was also wearing a helmet. I was also wearing a goggle. I was also wearing hand gloves, because sometimes walking and then there is a corroded pieces of equipment, and by accident you don't want to touch that. In certain clients, I was wearing when there are fire scenarios, I was wearing a clothing made by DuPont's brand Nomex. My boss would insist that, Umesh, please wear the Nomex suit, because you're passing through a zone which can have a fire probability. And you can't say, oh, that whole Nomex clothing makes me really, really, feel very hot and it's very cumbersome. You can't just say that, right? I mean, if you're making a site round, you as a consultant must wear everything. That's how you will expect others to wear their clothing. And these things are actually ensuring your own safety, right? So it's called PPE, personal protective equipment. So these jobs, the jobs that we're talking about, would push you to go to the site, and then you will be like one of those guys, right? And you need to be happy and proud about it. This is not about corner office, having a cup of coffee all the time, looking at a nice window, and and work 12 hours wearing a suit. This is probably that happens, but it doesn't happen all the time. There is a safety or environmental incident while the engagement is ongoing. So as part of your how, expect, again, you are a doctor. I mean, if you're a doctor, you're watching a movie at 2 a.m, and hey, somebody calls you from the hospital, and you have to tell your wife that, hey, I will watch the rest of the movie later because I have to go. Somebody is in pain, right? Similar thing happens while you are a consultant. Unfortunate incidents happen. Your boss may call you at midnight and say, let's take the first train in the morning. The client needs us. It may not be we solve that problem, but we need to figure out what happened. And it has happened many times in my life where previous evening I did, it was decided that I'll take the first flight in the morning and I'll land up, and then there's a train. And in like 5 to 6 hours, I was at the client site. Okay, so whether you are a consultant, whether you are a partner selling the engagement, you need to be friend indeed, right? And a friend indeed is friend in need, right? So that's what you need to do. The last bullet over here, how part, how do we do the work? We follow typical consulting protocols. We have to have project reviews. We have to have customer feedback. We cannot wait for the customer comments, till your last deliverable. You need to kind of include them. You need to tweak the engagement if it's going fast, if it's going slow. So those of you who will be taking the project manager responsibilities, you will look at the delivery schedule, whatever is in scope, who is doing it, at what speed they're doing it, etc., etc. Okay, so that is true with any project management. It's also very important over here. So let's take a pause because I spoke a lot. I gave you a good flavor of why we need to do operations consulting, why it is prevalent, why somebody like you may want to consider that, what will you do, and how you will do it. Okay, so let's take a pause and take a couple of questions. Trust me, this was the most important section, so the rest of the sections can fly in easy. So yeah.
So Umesh, we'll keep this brief because we are getting very close to 6 p.m. So just to make sure you have enough time. So just a couple of quick questions. There's a lot of questions around things like, how do you get into this field, right? Do you need more than a bachelor's degree? Do you need a master's degree? Do you need an MBA? And you don't really see a lot of HSE consultants in India. So what gives? Is there any insight you can?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Guru. We will pause that and we'll cover that in the skill set slide. So just give me 5 minutes to reach there. But I'll just pause it because I'm covering that at that stage.
So in that case, let's keep going because we're very close to 6. Yeah.
Right. So we can we go 5 minutes past 6? Is it okay?
That's good. Yeah, 5 minutes past 6.
Yeah. So I'll great. So thanks a lot. I just wanted to leave you with maybe one or two very quick concepts, and most of this stuff is available in public domain. I have given a source, but DuPont Bradley curve, we don't have time to get into the details, but it plots injury rates. As the cultural maturity on the x-axis improves, the injury rates go down. And I, as a consultant, often use this to start the engagement, to tell the client where they are. They may be in reactive or dependent zone, and they may go to independent and interdependent zones later on. Okay, but and you can read the text. I'm sorry, this is an important concept, and we don't have time for me to explain this to you. But the change we are looking at in culture, and this was a DuPonter called Bradley who created this concept by studying many DuPont plants and figuring out the cultural differences. So I follow the rules because I have to, kind of mindset to I follow the rules because I want to kind of mindset. Okay, so this is very important. Obviously, you will have a lot of questions that how Umesh as a consultant we bring that change, and it's a soft science. It's not the hard chemical engineering. So, but we will probably, those of you who have that question, please write me an email. But I have to move on. So really sorry about it. Risk matrix. I was alluding to risk matrix. I just wanted to show you an example. Risk is a product of likelihood and consequence, or frequency and severity, right? Something is high risk because it's too frequent but too less severe, or very severe but less frequent. Okay, and if it's both, then clearly it's a very high risk. So it's a product. And this is how you define it. And different companies define their risk matrix in different ways. And when you are solving 10 problems that I was telling you, you probably map those to the risk matrix and start solving the red zones. Like in this figure, the red zones, catastrophic, the 20 score and the 16 score. If you have incidents in those zones that major consequence and very likely, for example, that's what your consulting energy needs to be spent on. If the client tells you a low 2, a green zone in this figure, that means a minor consequence if the accident happens and a very rarely occurring, then you may just pass that for now, something like that. Okay, so this will help you prioritize your work. It will help everybody prioritize their work and assign financial resources to the problems, right? Swiss cheese model, very important concept. In a COVID situation, you wearing a mask, you washing the hands, and you maintaining social distance are the 3 barriers. Now, if all 3 fail, you may get an infection, right? You don't wash your hands or you don't wash it well. You forgot to wear a mask or whatever, and you went too close to a person who was coughing and sneezing. Okay, so the barriers align like Swiss cheese, which have holes in it. The big bad thing happens. So you as a safety consultant, your job is to make sure that there are adequate barriers and they are all functioning barriers. They don't have any loopholes or gaps in that, right? I mean, if you are a father, you will make sure that the mask your child is wearing is not torn, right? Etc. So again, a lot of common sense, but very important concept. We use it in safety design. I just wanted to show you that. We have time for like maybe 1 or 2 stories, client cases and stories. I have probably I'll spend 1 minute and take you through in 5 minutes with 5 cases. I picked 5 of my employers to give you some stories. I hope you will get some insights. When I was a young engineer, and I referred to this earlier, I was doing emission calculations for a plant in Saudi Arabia, but the company that was building it was a US-based company. So the norms were followed, for the US. Even if on certain air quality emissions, there were no specified, numbers like SO2 impacts, etc. At that time, in that part of the world, I was able to look at the laws in US and do those emission estimation calculations. Clearly, how much SO2 is permissible at the ground, etc. So I was busy doing that. So just wanted to give you a feel. The second example is when I was with Fluor in Houston, there was a German and Chinese joint venture. And when you are doing a hazard review in a Chinese setting, clearly there is a lot of translation required. So the hazard reviews go very slow. So this client called me in Holland, and we spent almost 10 days in Holland to figure out the main safety issues, then go back to China and debate out drawing by drawing. Sometimes for each drawing, we would spend 2 days. Okay. And I just wanted to give you a feel of what kind of interesting work your life may throw at you, right? So my life, I was 30 years old. I was going to, in 2 weeks, I was going to Fluor Daniels Amsterdam office. So I was going to Europe from US, do some high level stuff, with less translation and high speed work, get the main things out, I would say, and then go to China and spend what we did in 1 week in Holland. We would spend 4 weeks in China with translation and large Chinese teams, because this was being constructed in China. This was in Nanjing, this $2.5 billion petrochemical complex. So 1 week in Holland, 3 weeks in China, 1 week in US. And similarly, 3 or 4 times this whole cycle would repeat, right? Why I'm sharing that is the idea is that they are pre-brainstorming. I mean, what again Guru was saying, that this was at a design stage. So for a future accident not to happen, the design has to be perfect. And while Fluor Daniel is designing it, Are we able to imagine big bad incidents that will happen first with a bunch of Dutch people, because this was a Dutch office of Fluor Daniel working on it, bunch of Chinese guys in whose country this plant was, they were also adding, but what if this happens? What if that happens? Do we have adequate valves in here? Do we have this pipe as a right thickness pipe? All that you brainstorm, you do the first cut in Holland, then the second cut in China. And trust me, this plant was still 2 years away from being built, right? So this is how you introduce safety in design. This is how you brainstorm. Still bad things happen, but you go back to the Swiss cheese model. So this was probably the first barrier of safety, that design has to be robust, right? So just wanted to give you a feel of what work entails. Third was a classic strategy project with Accenture. You could guess the company. I was in Malaysia. I was doing flybacks, Kuala Lumpur and Bombay. But these guys wanted to take a stock at their health, safety, environmental strategy, and they had bunch of facilities in Malaysia and other parts of the world. So we ended up traveling to multiple places. When they say strategy doesn't come top line, it has to be bottom up, right? So I had to meet a lot of people. I was working with Accenture's Malaysia colleagues, and a very, very interesting learning experience for me. When I was at DuPont, again, I was in a commercial role. So I was actually not doing the calculations, but 6 months I was involved in a commercial negotiation. Here, the pain point was, a lot of contractors, they wanted to have avoidance of safety incidents. And so Umesh's proposal had to have elements of workplace safety, process safety, construction safety, and Umesh was in a commercial role. So I was continuously tweaking the proposal, looking at the price, looking at which consultants and, all that. So very, very different exposure. But again, I was able to relate to the client because of my previous background. So I just wanted to give you a highlight of that. And my last stint, very few months back, I was helping a Japanese company who has an operation in India. It's an acquired unit, and they want to have a step change in safety in that unit. So on one side, you have a Japanese culture and their stringent norms for safety and quality. You have an Indian unit which have, their own culture. And then they're calling in us as consultants, and I was a partner in charge. So I was actually responsible for every deliverable. If the client is not happy, then they would not pay us the money. So I was going with my team of consultants, participating in the reviews, giving my comments, etc., and routinely interacting with their India managing director. So I have deliberately given you these examples in a chronological manner. From a 22-year-old Umesh who was designing emission calculations for the Saudi client to this ERM client where now Umesh is 47 years old. Okay, so life in a journey of operations consultant, how the work kind of evolves, right? Now we are coming to an end. Straight away get into what Professor Guru was asking. How do you get in here? So basically, this is the client trust comes with domain knowledge. So you definitely, before even you get a first job, know the process and operations and get good grades. So being a good chemical engineer really, really matters, or a mechanical engineer, or an electrical engineer, or an instrumentation engineer. So go get good grades. Know your subject. Trust me, even 25 years down the line, a client will pay you, or the client will ask for you if you know your stuff. You cannot say, oh, I barely passed in IIT and I barely know thermodynamics. That will not work in consulting. So know your subject, get good grades. That's the first thing. Now coming to Professor Guru's point, get a job ideally as a client, get a job in operations, go work for a refinery client, go work for a pharmaceutical company. Do 5 to 10 years stint in before advising you somebody else. Be on the other side is what I'm saying. So your experience in a chemical industry, oil and gas industry, pharma industry would be really crucial. Couple that with an MBA degree. I'm saying it's desirable, not a must. But if you have 10 years of working experience, say 5 with pharma and 5 with specialty chemicals, when you are a 32-year-old young, dynamic, dashing person, you may actually start looking for these kind of consulting careers. Okay, it may not be the first job that you will take off campus. You, again, McKinsey or some of the classic strategy companies, you may start your career with, but these kind of operational consulting, you need to, again, you need to have smelled the pollution, you need to have put up some fires, you need to have worn those hard hats before you being a consultant. And I mean, it's common sense. Before somebody else listens to you, if for you to speak the client's language, it makes tremendous difference if you say, well, when I was a 25-year-old guy, I had the same issue, right? So when you are 30 and when your client is 25, you need to speak his or her language. So my first submission to you is, don't get into the operations consulting career straight thing after your BTech or MTech or BE degree. Go work for a industry and then look at how do we get into this kind of job. Okay, they will not make MBA mandatory, and there are few niche consulting companies. Even the classic Big Four and Big Five, they would also look at your profile if you have a very good operations experience, even not having an MBA. Right? Listening is important from a skill perspective, so you need to have great listening skills. You can't just keep talking. Also the positioning of potential solution and service. So you need to listen, but you need to have multiple feedback points so that you can have your own point of view and communicate with the client. One client solution will not work with other client, right? Verbal, written, and interpersonal communication skills and all the soft skills. And probably your engineering schools may or may not teach you those formally, but be aware of those and develop those. Empathy, positive attitude, compassion, demonstrated leadership would be highly desirable. And passion. I mean, lastly and importantly, passion matters a lot. You need to like what you're doing and why you may like what you're doing, right? The last slide of the day. It is cool to work in HSC, climate change and sustainability these days. I think it's more so ever, right? I mean, I moved to India 15 years back and I thought, how would I do in safety in India? And today, I mean, when my kid is like in 12th grade, 11th grade, she thinks sustainability is cool, right? So, and you guys are young enough, I guess, similar to my children's age, I guess. So these things are really, really important. Okay, so it's cool to be in these fields. That's one, definite point I can say. Many times the assignment in safety or sustainability is critical to get a business leadership role. So because you've been on the other side, you kind of have put up the fires through your own hands. You can't be a big boss unless you put up the fires, right? So it's very important. It's very, very critical. Also, opportunity to sharpen hard skills as well as soft skills. So IITs and engineering schools will teach you all the hard skills, and those are extremely important. But like I said, over the next few years, over the next 5 years, 10 years, continually in life, you need to keep evolving your soft skills, and the beautiful blend of that this career will kind of expect you to have, right? And then there is more demand to HSC roles than the available supply. So you can expect good pay. You can expect a very, very direct reporting to the operations leader. So you are in good hands if you land up some of these roles. But I would end by saying, go do a traditional operations role and then get into consulting, and I hope you'll be happy. So that's where I would like to wrap up. These are my contact details. Maybe one or two last questions, Professor Guru.
Sure. So there's a few questions out here. I'll just pick one or two since we're short on time.
Sure.
So one of the questions is around how do you form a team for a project, right? I mean, what kind of specialities do you need? What kind of skill sets do you need to have a team? If you're faced with a problem, then how does one go about forming a team, and how do you find these people? That's one question.
Excellent. So little tough one, but typically the consulting outfits will have different skill sets in different people. So although most of the guys will have the operations experience, but one may be a chemical engineer, one may be a civil engineer. So the chemical guy is likely to know more about the air issues, the civil guy is likely to more about the water issues. So when it comes to the teaming, you probably rely on the different pockets of expertise that they have earned in the previous lives, I would say. So here I'm assuming that I'm giving this really really straight advice to everybody that be 30 years old and then start doing this. So now I went there because I was doing hands-on Parsons and Fluor Daniel type roles. So if you land up in design jobs, that experience will come to you, but even though that will help you. Now, through those, that your decade in your 20s, when you are in your 20s, whatever you do may stick with you as your own core expertise. So you may do more fire modeling, okay, or you may do more soft safety, or you may get into more process safety, or you may do reliability. So that's what then when you are crossing 30, your colleagues will reach out to you because that will become your core. So in this HSE domain, there are a lot of small pockets or niche skill sets that you can probably have unique to yourself. You can also have, Professor Guru, the uniqueness of the industry. So if you are doing HSE consulting, but you worked with Cipla for 10 years, for example, right? So you will be very crucial resource in a pharma engagement because you know how a pharma industry functions, right? And somebody will reach out to you for your pharmaceutical industry expertise. If you work with Kane Energy, people will come to you for a upstream kind of knowledge, right? So where you're working, get some good clients, get some good career stints, and that will define where your comfortable zone is as a subset of this.
The other question is around so one of the things is that the traditional undergraduate or even postgraduate education, there are relatively few places that offer courses in these areas. So are there online resources that you could recommend that would be useful for people to look at?
Excellent question. So I fully agree with you. IIT Kharagpur has some guidance available because one of my dear client colleagues was doing PhD in process safety, and I absolutely agree with you that the obvious sources are less. One reference I would like to recommend to everybody out here is there is something called Center for Chemical Process Safety. It is spelled as CCPS. Okay, you can Google it. It's part of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. They call it as a task group or something. So CCPS has a huge body of knowledge. And when I was a young engineer and when I did not get to learn this while doing my master's, I remember reading CCPS textbooks. They have really, really nice books that my boss recommended, like Fundamentals of Vapor Cloud Explosion Modeling. I remember reading that. It's published by CCPS. CCPS has a presence in India. Companies like Reliance hold their conferences, etc. So if you are, it's a very commonly known, industry authority, I would say. So far, that would be my I would point guys and girls to that direction. They can if you are a good chemical engineer, you can easily pick up a CCPS book. If you are in US or it's available on Amazon, you can order one and read, and that can also get you going. So, and I'm sure your boss will ask you if you land up a role in Cipla company as a safety guy. I'm sure your boss will ask you to read the same book because it's not probably you missed it while doing your undergrad. So that's one thing. Attending industry conferences is another thing. There are a lot of symposiums and conferences. That's another way for people to get familiar. There is no obvious online platform I can point to. I would really go to CCPS. Of course, if you go for higher education in US, there are some really, really specialty schools. Texas A&M University, for example, has a very big name in process safety, and they hold a conference also. So that they can reach out to you or me. But if you need to have a master's degree, there are some specific schools that they can go, and they are very well-known schools in US. I don't know about this part of the world, and IIT Kharagpur I know because they have some PhDs in process safety, and also there must be some faculty who is guiding them. But going forward, these things will be more and more absorbed in curricula. I'm sure like 5 years later, the top colleges will have courses in this because this area is coming as a critical strategic area for operating successfully. Yeah.
Right, and one of my colleagues, Professor Sandeep Roy, also teaches a course on that at IIT Bombay. But
yes.
I'm guessing that the scope is, in terms of how widespread it isn't maybe as widespread as it needs to be. Another quick question. So you talked about consulting careers. And so, I'd like to think of that as sort of an external auditor versus an internal auditor. Are there sufficient for people inside these companies? So are there corporate roles rather than consulting roles which have the same flavor?
Yes, Professor Guru, definitely. If you are a part of a manufacturing organization, just to take examples of say Aditya Birla Group. I mean, there are HSE and sustainability roles at corporate level, and many times they let you function as internal consultants. So if you are part of a MNC multinational sitting in corporate, okay, then your internal stakeholders will be your business leaders and all. What I was telling about incident investigation. So you will be the first person to go to the site if there is an incident as an internal, not auditor, but internal HSE advisor. So now to get into these roles, again, it's important that you rise through the ranks. It may not be like immediately available for a 25-year-old. So if you're looking at, again, Aditya Birla Group, you may just work in the cement business for a few years, work with the cement business safety leader, express your interest, and again, the gray hair matters, experience matters. So these internal roles that I'm referring to, probably people can think about after they, just throwing a number there, after they cross 40 years of age, because by that time they would have nice 15 years. This area actually, the more you work in it, the more insights. It's a combination of experiential learning as well as theoretical learning. So that's why age matters a lot. Experience matters a lot. So, but yes, they are definitely available. So if you don't want to be a traveling consultant, you can take a nice strategic role, very, very focused. You can have a reporting to a very powerful person as your boss. But you need to be a little bit older for that, not youngsters like this audience. I mean, you're looking at 20 more years down the line for even bagging those roles. You can be part of a team. I mean, say you may have a 45-year-old internal safe head who wants somebody like a 25-year-old young HSE engineer as part of corporate team. That is possible. Yeah, and then again, experience matters. So then you will be able to work with the likes of Umesh in consulting capacity. So you become a client. You become a 25-year-old young client. You will learn through a consultant's journey. You may join a consulting company, come back to the core company and get into a senior leader kind of role in HSE. So there are two types of roles, just to end this. Health, safety, environment is one area, and sustainability is other area. That also becoming very important these days.
Okay, so we are well over time, but it's been a fascinating journey. Thank you very much for sharing your experience with us, Umesh. Do you have any final comments that you'd like to leave us with?
I just hope I'm sorry that I didn't get enough chance to interact with this beautiful crowd here, and I didn't really get to see the pulse of their heart in terms of what is on their minds, what questions they have. So I'm sorry for that. The message is that this is definitely an exciting career. It's not like working in a plant, but working in a plant matters a lot. So the comment is that be good engineer. In the end, what you're doing, you should know your stuff. So if you're in third year, fourth year, my parting message to you is whatever you may be doing, but doing what you're doing right now is important. Even working from home, studying from home, don't neglect these courses. Okay, so build a solid base and all possibilities are available for you. But this particular career avenue will be very strategic. So I really want some of you to think about this, and because there is a dearth of people excited about this field in our country, at least. So I want more and more of you to think about that and feel excited about chemical engineering. Tell your friends and brothers and sisters to pick up chemical engineering for these kind of careers. And it is cool. It is cool. Trust me, it is cool. So that's my you will feel proud about explaining what you do to your friends and families, guys. Okay, so I can say that from experience. It's wonderful to say that I somewhere contribute in a very humble way in saving somebody's life. Okay, so if you missed the medical school, if you are into IITs and engineering colleges, and I called you business doctors, this is that feel-good factor a doctor has, right? You are actually touching somebody's life, okay? And more so because you are also improving the air quality, you are improving somebody's health, somebody is trusting you. So there is a huge element of satisfaction that this career will give you. So I guess that is my parting message. So be happy about it.
Thank you very much, Umesh. And for the final remarks, I'd like to turn it over to Geetika. Geetika, would you like to take it from here?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So good evening, everyone. So I would like to conclude this session by thanking firstly Umesh sir for throwing light into this much less known field of chemical engineering. It was indeed an insightful session for all of us. I would also like to thank Professor Guruswamy for taking out his time and moderating this session. It was a wonderful experience having you both in this first lecture of ChemVision. I would also like to thank our sponsors, our title sponsors, Hindustan Platinum, competition partners Reliance, J Chemicals, Hikers, and our industrial partner Alkyl Amine for supporting our organization and making this event possible. Lastly, I would like to thank our wonderful audience, and I hope you really enjoyed this session. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, everybody.